Final preparations are underway for the USM Ocean Alliance research expedition to the Gulf of Mexico. It is a joint effort by this international research and conservation organization and USM researchers and students to evaluate the impact of the environmental disaster on whales, the marine life of which they feed, and the ecosystem that supports them. On Thursday, July 15th, I met with John Wise, USM toxicologist, and spoke with him about the upcoming expedition about to set sail.
Hi, I'm John Wise. I'm head of the Wise Laboratory of Environmental and Genetic Toxicology at the University of Southern Maine. I'm a professor there and director of the Maine Center for Toxicology and Environmental Health. We're on board the Odyssey, where we're getting ready to sail to the Gulf of Mexico to study how the pollution is affecting whales. This project came up when Dr. Ian Kerr, who's the head of Ocean Alliance, and myself learned of the problem in the Gulf and the impact it was having, and realized that we really needed to get down there as a preeminent marine mammal toxicology group. Our goal is to do 6 months. 6 months would be a very robust study because the Gulf of Mexico is rather large. At the moment we have 3 months of funding, funded by USM and Ocean Alliance. So we'll at least have half of the time. We'll sail down the Atlantic and sample samples in the Atlantic, and then work our way into the Gulf and collect samples in the Gulf. We're hoping to be able to, for example, put up a daily GPS map tracking the boat. We have a bow cam on the boat so we can take live video under the water. We have video cameras all over the boat. If we can raise enough money to broadcast live, we would announce on Facebook and Twitter that, say, in a half hour we're going to be approaching whales, and people can tune in and watch us work live. But we really want to get the message out about what is going on in the Gulf, what are we seeing, how is it affecting whales, how is it affecting people, and so on. What we're going to be doing on the boat is sampling whales. So we have a very benign, gentle way of collecting a skin sample from a whale. We will test that sample for chemical dispersants, for petroleum products, and for metals. We'll do genetics so we can understand which whale it is, sort of like a CSI thing where you do a DNA fingerprint of a human. We'll be doing DNA fingerprints of whales. We will be growing cells from the whales. Many of the species we'll be studying have never had cell lines developed from them, so that'll be a first. The boat's equipped with a state-of-the-art cell culture laboratory, which we're certain is the only one on a sailboat, probably the only one at sea. So we'll be developing that. We're going to catch fish and to understand if it's getting into what the whale eat, although for the baleen feeders we'll study krill. We're going to collect water samples to see what the water is like, where the whales are, and eventually we'll be collecting air samples to understand air around the whales.
My name is Matt Brown. I'm a student researcher from USM, and we're down inside the cell culture lab on the Odyssey, and I'm going to give you a brief tour of what we have down here. We'll start here with the incubator. This is where we're going to do our cell culture work, and if you can see, if you want to come and take a look here, this is actually a skin sample from I believe it's a sperm whale, and we're going to be doing all of our whale culture work in here. We'll be cutting it up into tiny pieces and putting it into little glass bottles so that we can ship them back to our lab for further analysis. Right here is our incubator. You can see it's at 33 degrees Celsius, which is the normal body temperature of marine mammals, of whales. And inside here, you can see these little contraptions. They move in a circular motion in any direction, and they're sensitive enough to go along with the whales so that we don't have the media sloshing up against the ends. And we have sperm whale cells growing right now that we've been growing for about a week, and we've had no contamination yet, which is incredible. But so what we're hoping to do is two things. We're going to take the whale samples and we're going to ship some of them back to our lab, and we're also going to try to grow some of them in these flasks seen here to see if we can keep them growing. Inside here is where we keep all of our media and reagents so that we can keep the cells growing. We have this bottle right here is our medium that we use for whale cells, and we take this out and we put some supplements in it, and it's basically like a Gatorade for the cells. This microscope will be when we take the flask of cells, like here in our incubator, and we'll put it we'll put it on this table here, and we'll look through just to make sure that the cells are growing according to what we think they should be.
It is pretty much a 24/7 operation. We will not sample whales at night because we simply can't see them. But we do have an acoustic array, which is how we find the whales, and that'll be manned 24/7. And if we see them in the middle of night, we will follow them until sunrise, and then we'll start our work as soon as the sun rises, because that actually is a very good time to see whales because of the light. And of course the lab will be going all of the time. The students will be studying all the time, and keeping quite busy. We plan they'll be taking courses online as well as intensive tutorials with me on the boat. We were planning this study before the oil actually happened. So our goal was to compare animals in the Gulf of Maine with animals in the Gulf of Mexico to kind of understand the Gulf of Maine a little bit better and what pollutants were like here. Clearly now the question is, how is the Gulf of Mexico much different than whales who are not exposed to oil? So the Gulf of Maine becomes more of the normal background levels, if you will, while the whales in the Gulf will be the heavily exposed whales. So the work will begin as soon as we launch. We'll be looking for whales. Our target species up here are humpback whales, because the humpbacks do go in the Gulf, but this time of the year they're up here. So we can sample the humpbacks up here, which will give us a baseline of the humpbacks, and then when they go into the Gulf later in the year, and then come back next year, we'll sample them again, and we'll see what's happened. The other thing we're worried about is oil coming into the Atlantic seaboard, and we want to get samples pre-oil, so that way if the oil comes, we can say whether or not the animals are exposed after the oil is here. Because you could imagine a scenario where people would argue that if you saw oil in the Atlantic and then oil in the animals, they'd say, well, how do you know it wasn't there all the time? This will allow us to say yes or no, it's changed. You know, I think we need to rethink the oceans. As a society, we view this ocean as a vast, imperturbable body of water, and it doesn't matter what we put in it. But I think this is showing us that we have to think of it differently. We rely so extensively on the oceans for fish and our survival and even our pleasure. We all like to sail or swim in the ocean. And when we poison the ocean, we're ultimately poisoning ourselves and hurting ourselves. And we really need to rethink our policy on ocean pollution and make it a little more protective, really, of ourselves and the life within the ocean.